It's kind of like a parallel to the Bush administration's foreign policy with preemptive strikes. What is the correct monetary policy? And I looked at this debate on the internet, and this guy said, well, we don't know exactly what correct monetary policy is, but at least we know it's not holding interest rates for too low for too long. I think that's a major conclusion of the monetary policy in the 2000s. Also, we try to answer the other questions, and as stated in our report, we find that US interventions in the housing market and in the market for housing securities has been a major destabilizing force during the bubble, which led up to this crisis. The answer to the third question, I would like to quote our leader of the Norwegian Supervisory Agency of Financial Markets, which is in Norwegian called Kredittilsynet, Bjørn Skogstad. He said that the causes behind this crisis is bad regulations, bad banking, and bad policy. And we wholeheartedly agree with that. But maybe our emphasis is on bad policies in the report. Okay, sorry. In comparing our findings in our report with Mr. Cooper's book, which focused mainly on monetary policy as the explanation of the current crisis, we should ask, could a financial crisis of this scale have happened if the only problem had been monetary policy and credit expansion? And we say in the report, probably not, but we would like to hear your comment on this. But however, we agree with Mr. Cooper that monetary policy has been a major factor. I think a major historical lesson from this financial crisis is the need to revise monetary policy and rethink the role of central banking in the economy. I think this is a debate that is much needed, and I think also that Cooper's book is a good contribution to start this debate. And also, in this regard, I would like to ask you a couple of questions. Yeah. Firstly, do you think the central bank should abolish Keynesian-style fine-tuning in the short run altogether, in order to focus on long-run monetary and financial stability? And also, do you think, as we kind of suggest in our report, that if a market correction had run its course in the wake of the dot-com crash, we could have avoided this financial crisis as we have seen it? And thirdly, an important part of monetary policy has been monetary rules. As I understand your book, we should abolish inflation targeting altogether. But if we do that, what kind of rule should we have a new rule, and how should this rule be? And fourthly, do you think this kind of monetary policy is even politically feasible? And lastly, sorry, many questions. Do you think the current crisis is mainly a result of government failure or of market failure? Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back on.
Before you answer those questions, we have quite a few questions from the audience as well, and so I just want to say that we encourage difficult questions and brilliant comments, but please keep them short and sweet. So I'll take notice of you, and then you can answer some of these questions first.
Okay, I'm not sure I can remember all 5 questions, so refresh me. But broadly, yes. Had we allowed had we allowed free markets more freedom to engage in a contraction after the dot-com boom, then we wouldn't have had such a big crash now. So yes, I do think the policies were incorrect from that aspect. Would we have had such a big crash now if it was only monetary policy that went wrong? Probably not, but probably the expansion would have continued even longer and then we would have got a big crash. So I do think the core of it is monetary policy. And your other question, sorry?
Oh, sorry. Do you think we need a new monetary rule?
On the rules, now this is an interesting one. What I say in the book is that we have asked the central banks to target consumer price inflation. That is, to target inflation in the goods and services market. And my point is that there are efficient markets, goods and services markets, and there are unstable markets, asset markets. We have asked the central banks to target inflation in the markets that do not need to be managed. They will manage themselves. The central banks were set up to manage the credit and the asset markets, and now we've directed them to manage the other markets. All we need in goods and services is to establish free trade and competition, and then inflation will look after itself. In fact, I would argue that the central banks like to claim success for fighting inflation, when in reality it was more the opening up of global trade in the last couple of decades that fought inflation. So I would say, yes, we need a new monetary rule. It needs to take into account credit and asset inflation. I'm reluctant to be too prescriptive in defining that exactly, and that is because I'm a strong believer in what's called Goodhart's law, which is whenever you start to focus too much on a variable, you find that there are distortions creep in and that variable becomes less useful. That's what's happened with CPI. The central bank started focusing on consumer price inflation and then it stopped representing what they should have been looking at. So yes, take into account credit and assets, but don't be too precise in what you're defining, because you're going to need to adapt that over time.